Hi, this is Graphically Alex coming at you with all things fat related. If that's something that interests you, please subscribe. I'd love to have you. Today we are back again. I didn't dream about her last night, I promise. Did any of you dream about her? Let me know if you do. But all I have to say as a preamble today is I am really cold. I'm cold. And I feel like my spirit is dying as the winter goes on. Not really, but that's kind of dramatic. But it's just like, ooh, it's like, that's kind of the emotional pitch I feel. It's like, ooh, like as it just goes on and on and on. And I'm like, oh, I think February will probably be, I don't know, February is usually worse for me, honestly. But I think I'll probably be very brat by February, so I'll be ready to go back. But oh, we got some. We'll be back to our normal programming in February, though. But I appreciate y'all. You guys are helping me stick to everything. It does help me. And I hope I'm helping you too. So let's go ahead and get going. Let's go.
That broke me. And that is a really, really difficult thing to explain.
I want to share with you something that my mentor told me a long time ago about why people seek help.
Uh-huh.
And he's a joint replacement surgeon, right? So he deals with people who have terrible arthritis in their knees and their hips all the time. And he asked me, he said, do you know when people come to me and they say, I want a knee replacement? And I said, oh, like, when their x-ray looks terrible and they're in, so much pain. And he said, it's not about the pain. People can handle pain, and people are handling pain all the time. It's when you are emotionally fatigued from the pain that is when they come to see me and they tell me they need help. And so you should feel no guilt in that you felt like it took too long for you to seek answers and reach out for help. I would say that's the norm.
Thank you. Thank you for telling me that. Honestly, thank you. It got to the point where I was afraid I was going to die. I know that sounds like dramatic, but I was.
It's not dramatic. I've told you guys a lot. When you're that size, you have to take it seriously. It's not a joke. It's not cute. Again, we are very realistic about the state of supermorbid obesity on this channel. If you feel it, you're probably not being paranoid. You need to take care of yourself and be very careful. Because I'm telling you, being that big, it's really, really bad. Okay, and I know that they're not going to want to hear that, and a lot of people don't want to hear it, especially in fat acceptance and whatever, but it's bad. So you have to take it seriously, and you have to, go to the doctor if something's going on, or you have to be doing something to mitigate your weight, or, you have to be on a path of some sort. Sorry, there's like a dust bunny floating around. You have to be doing something and taking it seriously, especially if you're feeling that way from such a big size. You have to take the feeling seriously because there are a lot of people who do pass away. There are. So I think you need to take it seriously. That's all. I think she's trying to be like, oh, I thought I was. Oh, that's so dramatic. It's not dramatic, not at your size. You got to take it seriously.
Also having extremely intense periods. I was bleeding constantly.
So
I just felt like my body was on the verge of shutting down. And if this is what living was like, then I didn't want to live. And so at that point, it became a choice of, do I want to die like this? Or do I want to try and make it better? And it took me a year of therapy to get to the point where I could mentally see a doctor because I was so paranoid
wow. And did the therapy talk at all about the possibility of an E followed by the letter D or no? I'm telling you guys, people need to do better. Some of this is not her fault. Some of this is the institutional issues. So she's kind of making those more glaringly obvious as we go through. A lot of you guys are really upset that this doctor is not providing any pushback. I'm very upset that her therapist didn't even consider that she may have that issue. It doesn't sound like it, because otherwise Anna would be saying, we were working through my E followed by the letter D. I don't hear that coming out of Anna's mouth. So what was her therapist doing? Talking in circles or what? What were they doing? That actually pisses me off a lot. That makes me really mad.
All the things I'd heard. And part of that paranoia.
That's an institutional issue of people in the mental health field not taking this side of the spectrum of ED seriously. It isn't taken seriously. It's a huge issue. It's worse. There's more people on that side of the spectrum. But everybody wants to sit and talk about how much they care about E followed by the letter D, but they don't. They're very selective about it. That's not okay. B followed by E followed by D is the most common version of it. So you should be the most educated about it. You should look at her size, and highly question if she has it as a professional. You should be like, I need to test her for this. It should be one of the first things you do. And that doesn't sound like that's what that therapist did. And that pisses me off.
It came from an experience I had when I first entered the body positive movement, where I went to a doctor. At this point, I was still really active. I was running about 3 miles a day. I was smaller than I am currently, and eating, pretty healthy. So I went to the doctor. I walked in. She ran all my labs. There was nothing wrong. I did not have, diabetes, prediabetes. At this point, nothing was wrong with me. And she tried to put me on diabetes medication simply because I was overweight, even though my blood labs did not indicate I needed it. Then she tried to sell me a program where I give myself a shot and eat 600 grams of chicken or something like that. Do you know what that is, by the way? It's like some...
That's really not helpful.
Shot you don't eat, and then you eat...
It's too extreme. I mean, I do think she's showing these aspects of the institutions that are off. That's really, really, really extreme. That's not going to be helpful for somebody, especially with an E followed by the letter D. That's going to just be an overly restrictive phase that will lead to a massive binge phase that could last months afterwards. It's very irresponsible.
Like a tiny amount of protein, and that's it. And she was like, I want you to do this for 30 days. And I literally was like, hell to the no, no, no.
She would just eat and eat and eat after anyways. It's pointless.
I will not. Do you know what I'm talking about? Do you even know what that is?
I have no idea what that is. I mean, nowadays, with the era of Ozempic, right? Yeah. People think shots. That's
no, it was not Ozempic.
I don't believe that was the norm.
This was this was before that, and it was like some crazy thing, and then you would reintegrate food. So
no, that's too much. I'm always about like what actually is possible and what will actually occur. And it's frustrating to hear a doctor jump to something so extreme all the time. And it's so irritating to me because it's like, gosh, like, do you not have any understanding of human beings? Like, why don't you give actual attainable goals to a patient that they can actually do? It's so frustrating. It's so frustrating. Telling somebody to eat, whatever, she's going to have 600 calories of chicken and nothing else and get a shot. That is not realistic. That's just not. You're so much more likely to stick to smaller changes over time. One of my things that I did because of my thyroid, I immediately had to cut seed oils, all seed oil consumption, zero. I had to go to zero for years. And so what I did is I would make my own stuff. So if I wanted cake or something, I'd make my own cake. If I wanted pizza, I'd make my own pizza. I'd have my own sauces, right? I do things myself because it was a way for me to still feel like I was eating normally, even though I technically wasn't. And over time, my thyroid was recovering because it was attainable. It was an attainable thing. I think when people talk about food addiction, the real issue is convenience addiction. People are addicted to convenience. They're addicted to, I put this in the microwave and that's it. And I don't think about it. And then I just shovel it in my mouth. That's what they're addicted to. Food does not have a chemical dependency in the same way that another drug would. It's not the same. It's a different part of the brain. It's a whole other laundry list of things. I always try to be mindful about talking about how E followed by the letter D is much more similar to OCD than addiction, because it's these repetitive mindsets said over and over again in your head, and that's what leads to a shift in eating behavior. It's not the food. It isn't about the food. It's the same thing if it's a restrictive one. It's not about the food. It's about this mental game that you're playing with yourself. And that's really all it is. And I know it's hard for people to understand that haven't had it, because people see it from the outside and they just see addiction. But it doesn't help. And that's the only reason I speak out against it, because it does not help. 9 times out of 10, if you tell somebody you're addicted to food, it doesn't help them. It goes to their head and it bounces off like nothing. And I just want you guys to say things that are actually effective. You're doing a ritual. This is a whole routine that you're doing. This is something you're reinforcing to yourself over and over again every single day. Why do you tell yourself that exercise isn't for you? These are the kinds of things that you should ask somebody, not say you're an addict. Why do you think exercise isn't for you? Do you think if you stopped telling yourself that, maybe it would be different? Why are you crying over not being able to get a certain bagel? What is the actual problem? Does it make you feel anxious? Why do you feel anxious over that? You see, it's an anxiety thing. They're actually anxiety disorders, or it's an anxiety disorder. It's not an addiction. So when you call somebody an addict, they just tend to use that label to beat themselves up with it, and nothing happens. It doesn't change. And so for me, I just feel like it adds to the drama of the disorder. It adds to a feeling out of control, which you're not. The whole thing is that you're in control. The point is that you're in control of it, which again, you have to work with that. So again, a doctor telling somebody who's obsessed with control over their diet to just have 600 calories of chicken or whatever, you really think that somebody can go from being so insanely in control of their diet to completely out of control of it? No. No. My mom was telling me that she wanted pizza. I said, then make some. If anybody is addicted to something, they're addicted to convenience. If you have to actually get up and cook something, you have to really think about if you want it. And that's a totally sane, normal limit to put on yourself. That is attainable. It is an attainable limit. If I want this, I can make it myself. Even if it is a mental game, you got to start fighting mental games with mental games. But I do think, in certain cases it is physical. Like if you cannot handle, if you have a hormone issue and you have to kind of have something different, and you have to do it, It is what it is. And like my mother is also very hypo, literally medicated, right? So it's the thing. Because people, I think when you make it yourself, you're just more connected to it. It's more of an experience. And it's more like, honestly, healthier for you because it probably doesn't have a lot of crap in it that it normally would. So I just think people need to think about it that way too. And just do things that are attainable. It needs to be attainable because my whole thing is don't sit there and like think of like, oh, I have to do this perfect thing and this perfect that and I have to be perfect and I have to do this and da 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 da, because that is all a part of the toxic ritualistic. You don't. In order to lose weight, you just have to reduce your calories. That's it. That's it. Even like a lot of my pro-thyroid suggestions that I made on this channel, they're just to help you not be as hungry. It's to help you to not be as hungry and not be as tired. That's the two biggest enemies of weight loss. The third biggest enemy is the mental gymnastics part of it. But I'm just saying, people have to think of the controlling aspect over the diet and shift it slowly over time. Otherwise, it doesn't actually change. And that's what frustrates me. And I feel like they should know this. I feel like people should know that. Do you go from 0 to 100? No, you don't. You don't completely take away somebody's control over their diet with this issue. If anything, you tell them to cook it themselves because guess what? They're even more in control. You see? But it's also healthier. You see? Is it making sense? So a person will feel more calm and even more in control because they're cooking it themselves. Just saying. You gotta work with people in some ways. And I had to work with myself and it worked. My hypo got better, my appetite went down, etc., etc. Rest is history, right?
I remember being terrified because she also sat me down and she's like, you need to exercise more. You need to do this. And I'm like, I'm running 3 miles a day. There is nothing more I can do. So I had that experience. And now let's add to the table. I've gained back the weight. So now I'm 100 pounds heavy.
I would heavily suggest weightlifting over cardio for a super morbidly obese person. Which a lot of people don't want to hear that because they think, oh, I don't want to bulk up. Oh my gosh, I'm going to be so heavy. It doesn't matter. You're already really heavy. And honestly, transitioning some of that fat to muscle is really helpful metabolically because you have to create as much leverage against the overwhelming amount of fat on your body as possible for this to be successful or possible. So please lift if you can. You don't have to lift crazy. You don't have to lift heavy. You don't have to do all that. Focus more on that than cardio from a super morbidly obese perspective. Cardio can definitely come in later, but your major cardio, in my opinion, as a SMO, super morbidly obese person, should be walking because it's enough. It is enough. And walking, pacing, all that is great. It's great to walk. It's highly, highly underrated, especially from a super morbidly obese perspective. I totally get it. If you're obese or under, it may not be enough for you. I'm still not going to be on the Stairmaster at Obesity. Hell no. But if I'm in shape or I'm closer to it or whatever, I might be on a Stairmaster, I'm not against cardio. I just think she's thinking running 3 miles. See how not successful it was for her. That's a typical experience. It usually isn't. Maybe it will work for you. Remember, it can always work for you, right? But I speak a lot in generalities and in trends and in most people with these issues. Most people that are super morbidly obese, they are not going to lose weight by running 3 miles. They're going to just eat and eat and eat to compensate for it. They're going to get in a lot of pain. They're going to get injured. They're going to be overly exhausted. It is an anti-thyroid workout, which again, just long distance running is anti-thyroid, which is not always a bad thing. If your thyroid's strong, it can take a punch, right? You can challenge your thyroid, you can challenge yourself. But when you're super morbidly obese, your thyroid is already fried and you don't need to do anything more to really push your thyroid when it's already so pushed. I'm telling you, it's really, really important. You will get really tired and really hungry. And those are the two biggest enemies of weight loss: hunger and exhaustion. You have to mitigate those things from a super morbidly obese perspective, or you will not make it. Typically, you won't. And I get it. There are always going to be people that can just go into a machine-like mindset and they can just do it. But I'm an emotional girly pop. I'm not like that. I couldn't do that. I couldn't just be a machine and shut everything off and do it. And I don't even know if that's always the best way, because I don't think it's good to ignore hunger signals and stuff like that. It needs to be addressed, in my opinion. Can make it a lot more harsh. But some people can do it. I'm not talking to those people. I'm not talking to the person that loses 250 pounds in a year or whatever, which I hope it stays off, you know? I'm talking to somebody who is really big, has been big forever, and needs to lose the weight, and is probably going to realistically look at 40 to 50 pounds a year until it's off. And it stays off. You know, one of the biggest things about the picture I posted on my community page yesterday was that it's from 2021, which means it's been years, which means it's a years-long trend of it going down. Even my own mother told me I didn't even look like that anymore. She's like, that picture doesn't look like you at all anymore. And it's because of the longevity of the journey and the longevity of the progress. That's what you need. And most people, especially from a psychological perspective, if you do have these issues, you need that longevity because it can be too overwhelming. My biggest fear is that people regain. I'm not going to regain, but I'm talking about people in general, because the more you gain and lose the same weight over and over, it's harder and harder on your metabolism. It's harder and harder on your thyroid and all these things. That's how it can damage it, because it's too harsh. You want to be one and done, period. I'm a one and done person. You want it to be done. Please, you know? Okay, let's continue.
Heavier. What is that doctor going to say to me now? If that was my last experience, what is that doctor going to say to me now? They're going to say, you're trash. And now I've heard from everybody else around the internet that when you get bigger, it just gets worse and worse and worse. And they're nasty and mean and they do all these things. So
well, it's hard because they're giving her something that's unattainable. And she's thinking it's just going to be even more unattainable now. If you tell somebody, go to the gym, don't even put weight in the machines, but move your muscles in those machines, that's attainable. Somebody can think of that and they'll think, I can do that. I can, because it's mostly about, first of all, moving it all. Let's be so for real. And secondly, it's about creating that routine and getting more comfortable with the environment and all these things, getting that work done. All that stuff matters. You have to slowly diffuse the fat noise. And being afraid of going to the gym because you're fat, that's a fat noise thing that you have to deal with. Because it's a barrier, it's a mental barrier that you don't need. So you have to just go and get over it. I'm sorry, I know people don't always like to hear that, but it's true. It's, if it is accessible to you, if you can do it. Obviously, if you can't, then that's not who I'm talking to. But in terms of people who do have access, who can go, you have to go. And you have to get over that fat noise that's preventing you from going, because it's one of the most helpful things to have long haul weight loss, to actually keep weight off, to actually do this stuff. It's so important. So I do promote it. It doesn't mean that every single person in the entire world has to do it and all this stuff, but most people do. I'm talking from generalities. This will help most people succeed. So it should be seen as the more common thing to do, is to lift weights when you're super morbidly obese. It will help you, especially because you're often eating so much, you can put on a lot of muscle very quickly. And that happened to me in 2022. I was going to the gym in fall 2021, and then I went to I didn't go to the gym until late 2022, but I started like moving. I started exercising because I started an active job in January of 2022, and it was so hard. I'm just gonna let you know, it was really hard for me at the time, and my knees were killing. It was horrible. It was really tough. Sorry, not to be too negative about it, but I'm just being real. It sucked. It was hard. But through that job and being active on the job, I started putting on a massive amount of muscle because I was eating so much still. And so you could put on a huge amount of muscle, especially if you're eating like a huge amount of protein a day, for example, which I was craving it massively at the time. And I just ate it. I would eat like a whole chicken every day. And I put on a huge amount of muscle. And that muscle is ultimately what gave me enough leverage to start sustainably losing by August of 2022. So you have to really understand that muscle is leverage against fat in a super morbidly obese state. And the fat itself, it's so much that it's powerful. I don't know how else to explain it. It's very, very, it like affects you a lot. Makes you really, really hungry. Makes you really, really, really tired, right? It does all these different things. So you need that muscle to give you the strength to keep going. And that's so important. I would not be here if I hadn't built muscle prior to starting to sustainably lose weight. I would not have done it. I wouldn't have been able to. So anyways, that's just some advice.
Fear of the doctor was intense. So after a year of therapy, I kind of went through it. I saw a doctor.
Don't worry about getting the number on the scale as low as possible, as fast as possible. What matters primarily is your health anyways. And muscle is healthy. So it doesn't matter if your weight doesn't go down. It doesn't matter. Even if it went up, if it's muscle, it doesn't matter. It's helping you. You have to think about things a little differently and think long game, long term, not short term. You don't want to just short term lose weight and then put it back on. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter then that you lost it. You put it back on. What matters is that it's kept off. So that's why I always tell you guys, be calculated with your decisions while you're losing, because you want it to stay off. And again, I'm not talking about winter bloat, but remember, winter ends, and so does that winter bloat. It comes off. It may be demoralizing. I know a lot of people are probably demoralized right now, but it comes off every year. So don't trip about it. Okay, let's continue.
Through a process of extreme elimination. ZocDoc is amazing to get reviews on doctors, so you can at least get a gist of what people like and don't like about them. And so I read all of the reviews, and luckily someone who was plus size had already seen this doctor and said that they were kind and compassionate and all of that. And I said, awesome. I'm going to go to this person. That doctor, I can definitively say, changed my life because they started the process for where I am now. And when I went in to see him, he sat down, and honestly, I walked in with going back to shots. I said, just give me Ozempic. Just do it. If it'll make me feel better, I can't feel this way, because I honestly believed that the solution to my problem was that I needed to lose weight. So I had worked through therapy to accept that losing weight could help my health. I went through a lot of things to try to accept the fact that I was going to have to lose weight, right? And that wasn't a bad thing, but it was about feeling better. So I went into this doctor and I'm like, just give me the shot. And he literally looked at me and was like, how can I give you a medicine if I don't know if you're sick? And it kind of took me back. He's like, I'm not giving you anything until we read your labs. He's like, I don't know what's going on with you. And that is not a professional thing to do. Just hand over medication to a patient I've just met. So
That's fair enough.
ran some labs on me. And the first thing that came up is that I was in a really bad place. My instincts of the fact that I was on the verge of death weren't necessarily so wrong. I had major deficiencies in a lot of different vitamins. I had a lot of anemia and I was losing blood. Additionally, I came back as positive for Hashimoto's. So,
Hypo. Bing! Vindicated. Give me a check. Give me my flowers.
I literally thought, okay, these are the answers, right? So put on a medication for.
That's not it, babes. You got the disorder too, hun. Let's not play. We're gonna do this little game with you, Anna. You're gonna tell your story, and you're gonna totally omit that major part. But yes, there are physical issues too, which is unfortunate. It makes it that much harder. Which, remember, the disorder will make her Hashimoto's worse. It makes it worse, Anna. So you have to deal with that psychological issue first. Because no matter what, that will undermine everything you do. No matter what you do, it will undermine it. So you're going to take a thyroid medication, but you're going to take part in this disorder that's going to make it worse anyways. Doesn't make sense, right? Wouldn't you just want to have everything going in this direction, or do you want to have things going like this? Or have a tug of war? I'm have a tug of war. I'm going to take this med to help my thyroid, but then I'm going to do this disorder to hurt it. And we'll see who wins every day. See, it's that kind of like, it's that same slot machine mindset that I'm talking about. She's still, it's all there. It's all there.
Synthroid, which is what you take for thyroid disorder, or hypo, or the what?
Hypo. Yes. Yes. Hypo. I was the hypothyroid Pokemon in 2023. Hypo.
So Hashimoto's thyroiditis, it actually can cause hyper or hypo depending on it's your body's attack on your thyroid.
Yes, but obviously it's hypo because Anna is massively overweight.
It's the production of the thyroid hormone. So a medication like Synthroid is given when you have abnormally levels of low thyroid hormone in your body.
Okay, thank you. So I got put on Synthroid. I got put on all these vitamins. Immediately, things started to improve to a point. I started having more energy.
Yes, because it's not the only answer. We can't look at everything as I take a pill and it's done. Obesity doesn't work that way. I covered that in the first episode.
I started having less days in extreme fatigue. So I started to feel better, and I was like, this is it. I've solved all my problems. I started to lose weight just because
That's not it, babes.
Thyroid was now working. That's a problem. So I was like, everything's solved. Everything's done. Everything's great. And it was good for a couple months, but then a lot of the stuff started to come back. So I did get relief. It's just not in the permanency that I expected. So I started to
Because you can do things to undermine your medication's effectiveness, like massively overeating seed oils, for example. Like eating too much soy, for example, eating too much estrogen. If you drink, if you smoke weed, I don't think she does, but I'm just saying, if she did, it would undermine it. It's not one thing, babes. Your thyroid is not one little thing. You pop a pill and it's over. No. You likely have to change your lifestyle if you have that diagnosis. You likely have to change how you do things. Obviously, you can still do things every once in a while, but it can't be like, oh, I have a glass of wine every night. No, you don't. Not if you want your medication to actually work. It means you have to actually get all your nutrition in. So you can't have all this like, oh, I'm just gonna, forget about these nutrients. For example, calcium. Calcium is major. It's a major, major nutrient for people who are hypothyroid. It's extremely necessary because you tend to burn through it fast and you tend to pee it out quickly. So you have to constantly be getting calcium. And there's just a lot to it. It's a whole thing, but she's still in that pill mindset. If I pop a pill, then it's cured. No, that's why she didn't get better. Because she wasn't doing a more holistic approach. The number one thing being, I have to say it, not taking part in toxic ritualistic behaviors. That's your number one. That's the most important for the thyroid. The most important. If you don't do that, then it won't really help. That's step one. But yes, taking medication when you're not producing, that's a good thing. But you have to do things in order to have the synthroid actually work in the body. It means you can't just do takeout willy-nilly. You can't drink willy-nilly. You have to have certain limits. Like I said, you can't have 5,000 pounds of soy milk a day. You can't have a lot of estrogen when you have a thyroid issue. It will undermine it. And remember, when you're super morbidly obese, your estrogen's already way up here. So you don't want to do anything to make it even higher. It's not good. Gosh. But then, it just didn't work. I wonder why. Because you didn't actually take care of your thyroid. That's why. That's why it didn't work.
Have fatigue again. I started to have anemia that we couldn't get under control. And my doctor was like, I think something's wrong with your menstrual cycle, your lady bit. Something's not right down there. So he said, I'm going to refer you to an OBGYN. I probably needed to see one anyway, because again, I hadn't been to the doctor in a really long time. So he referred me to someone that was with my insurance, and I walked into the room, and he had just built this great perspective of doctors for me. So I went in with full hope and full glory. Like, the entire medical community has changed. Everything is great. We're respected and cared about now. Yay. And this woman was absolutely terrible to me. She would not give me the treatment that my doctor had requested I'd have, because she said that I was just too fat for it. And she refused to give me a pap smear for the same reason. She said that the only thing that was wrong with me was that I was too fat. And repeatedly told me this, to the point where I broke down crying in the parking lot outside. I messaged my doctor in the little portal, and I said, I guess I'm just too fat for the normal period. And he was like, listen, I have a friend.
I don't know everything about this, but from what I've heard, it does seem like it definitely can affect it. Okay. Again, I'm not the expert on this. I'll even pause it. Let me Google. One sec. Okay. Yes, obesity can affect your menstrual cycle. Hormone imbalances. Obesity can cause the body to produce too much estrogen, a hormone that regulates the reproductive system. This can lead to irregular periods, heavy bleeding, or stop periods. Endometrial dysfunction. Obesity can alter the function of the endometrium, which can lead to heavy menstrual bleeding. Earlier puberty. Obesity in childhood and adolescence can cause puberty to start earlier. Menstrual disorders. Obesity can increase the risk of premenstrual disorders and dysmenorrhea, if I pronounce that correctly. So, you heard it here. Maintaining a healthy weight can help reduce the risk of menstrual disorders. If you have a BMI of 30 or more and your periods are affected by your weight, your doctor may refer you to a dietitian. There you go.
Not going to be covered by your insurance, but he's good. He will listen to you, and he's my friend. His approach to medicine is the same as my approach to medicine. And I remember walking to that office and being like, this is going to be a train wreck again. I don't know if I can take it. If this happens again, I don't know if I can keep going. And he sat me down. He said, I'm not here to treat your weight. I'm here to treat your illness. Again, that same kind of messaging where I'm like, okay, this guy has got it. So he did all of the things, and he said, I'm going to biopsy you. You shouldn't be bleeding this much. You are on all of these iron supplements and you're still anemic. That doesn't seem right. So they ended up doing a biopsy. They did find a growth in my uterus, and it was inconclusive. The test was inconclusive. So it could have been cancerous. It could not have been. And he's like, we're going to have a surgery date for you in 3 weeks. You need to get it out. So like I went in from hearing nothing's wrong with you, you're just fat too, to hearing you have a growth and it needs to be removed immediately because we're concerned about its size. Finding out I had to pay out of pocket to receive basic care just because I was in a bigger body was so frustrating and so debilitating because at this point I'd already spent so much money. I was driving to see doctors. It's like I couldn't catch a break. And then to be in a situation where someone literally refused to give me basic care that my primary care doctor had already requested because they were concerned something was going on is wild to me, right? And that
So, what I think about this is that it is important to understand that when somebody is super morbidly obese, they could have much more serious issues than just the weight. So it's not that the weight isn't an issue, it's that it could be not the only issue. Remember, obesity, especially super morbid, and when you get to all these levels, it drastically increases your risk of getting cancer. Especially, we've seen people have, reproductive cancer, even somebody like Amberlynn Reed, for example, right? Because it all has to do with that excess estrogen. It's a huge issue. So you have to take it seriously. I think as a doctor, you should take it seriously and be like, this weight is an issue, but we need to see if it's already escalated to something worse, which it sounds like in her case, it had already escalated and she's going to need medical intervention for what has already gotten worse. So I don't think the first doctor handled it right either, but I think it's important to kind of hold that middle ground in this area because you can't delude people into acting like the weight doesn't matter because it quite literally does. It does. So these are like difficult things where I think stuff should shift a bit because if somebody's coming in, it means it's likely gotten worse, which means there might be something worse going on. And you should assume that it's bad. Somebody comes in, they're super morbidly obese, they're in a very bad condition, and that has to be known. And then you treat it as such. You take it seriously. That's my view of it anyways.
That was an acceptable answer, and that was okay, and that person felt entirely comfortable doing it. And then to have to pay out of pocket to get the basic standard tests that lots of people get all of the time and find out, oh, I do have a tumor, was just so incredibly frustrating. Like, why did I have to pay to find out something that we pretty much already had a good inkling might be happening?
I'm not going to comment on the cost aspect because it's kind of irrelevant. That's a different discussion for a different channel for a different time. It's just, that's a different thing. I'm not going to go into that. People have cost issues regardless of weight. So we're going to let that one go. At least for the sake of this conversation.
Because someone didn't want to believe it. Someone didn't believe that a plus size person could actually have an issue. That it couldn't be anything other than my weight. There's no way. And I had to pay for someone to believe me. So I was scheduled for surgery 3 weeks later. I had to have some really tough conversations about anesthesia and what that meant in a bigger body. But again, because I had a doctor that...
It's so difficult because it makes everything worse. And you want to prevent this type of situation from happening. So you want to get control over the weight and get it into a better direction just in case anything happens, and it's easier. It's easier to get treated. You don't have to have all these conversations about this stuff, and they're pretty good for the most part, but you always want to reduce your risk. And again, there's no prize for being super morbidly obese. You don't win a contest for it. There isn't a benefit to it. So you have to understand, like, you should work on it, especially when times are better or when times are good, because you don't know what could happen in the future. So it isn't prudent to stay super morbidly obese. It just isn't. It's not a smart thing to do, because if she wasn't, she'd be in a much better position with all this stuff happening. And there's no reason for her not to be.
Actually was educated about plus size.
But if you're there, you got to face it. You got to do what you got to do. It's risky. Stuff is risky, but it's risky to be that size. So you should be used to it. I know that that's cold, but it's a fact. If you have an issue like this, like Anna did, she has to face it. You have to do something about it. It's the same thing with Amberlynn Reed. She had to get her cancer dealt with. You can't just be scared about it and not do anything about it. You have to take the risk because you're already in a bad position. It's the types of questions we have to grapple with when we're super morbidly obese, which is partially why I'm like, get out, you guys. Because then things like this become less risky. That's what you want.
He was able to find an anesthesiologist to work with him that had worked on bigger bodies before, and I was able to have a really successful surgery. Fortunately, when we came out of that surgery, it was benign, the growth, and it was removed.
I'm glad.
But there began to be questions about my estrogen levels. They weren't necessarily tracking high, but the nature of the growth made it feel like there was potentially too much estrogen in my body.
The obesity is a problem. Gosh, this is so frustrating to listen to.
So it didn't make sense. Let's just put it that way. And there's several times in my journey where things don't make sense. So that happened. And again, when I had the tumor and I had that removed, that was really scary because we didn't know if it was cancerous or not. It really came down to, oh, this is a hormonal thing. This is, maybe related to your weight, may not be, but we've solved it.
It is.
Then we have precautions going forward. That's never going to be an issue again.
It just may not be the only issue, but your weight is affecting it.
I feel less anemic. I was like, we've solved it. Everything's done. I'm great. Things are perfect. And then those problems didn't go away. I still have issues with anemia. I still have exhaustion. But every time you go into a surgery or a major treatment like that, you hope on the other side that that's the answer. And it is a little bit of a heartbreak every single time you get that diagnosis and you start that treatment and you think, this is it. This is the time where everything gets better and I can magically be this person that I have dreamed of being or have been previously.
Oh man, it's heartbreaking. Some of that is heartbreaking to hear. Because honestly, I know it's hard for people that haven't been there. They probably hear her and they're like, oh my gosh, like what the heck? And, you know, but when you've really been there and you've had to consider life and death stuff or will I ever get better? You know, there was a long time where I didn't know if I would get better from taking care of my thyroid and losing and doing all these things. I didn't know. And every once in a while, I would get these little glimpses of hope that I was. Kind of like, you know how you have those warning signs that I talked about where you get a warning sign and then it goes away. Then you get a warning sign, then it goes away. Then your health collapses. Your health collapses. I had the opposite happen where I'd get these flecks of light. I even did like a little essay about it or like a little thing on my channel where I talked about the Evermore lyrics for the Swifties. I know you guys are here, where she says, like, in the fleck of light, I thought of you, or I dreamed of you. I dreamed of a healthier version of me when I'd see those little hopes, those little moments of hope, and I held on to that because part of getting out is having enough faith that you can. It's really difficult. And so I understand where she's coming from here, but it's that same disordered mindset of that lightning in a bottle, that, oh, I found the answer, this is it. And it's like, the answer is likely not simple, Anna. When I did everything, I told you guys, I completely changed my entire lifestyle on a total holistic level. Even things like chemical exposure, even moving out of a polluted area. I moved to the south where it wasn't as polluted. I mean, people don't think about these things, but they really, when you're in a very, very bad state, you have to really make some serious decisions. Having an active job, for example, that is a holistic decision that I made. It changes the lifestyle I have. You have to make lifestyle changes on multiple levels, especially from a very severe point. So for me, it was no magic pill. It was a lot of stuff I was doing that I hoped would work. And I got little glimpses that it was working. And it did. It ultimately worked. You have to be real about it. You have to do your due diligence with everything. Because there is no easy answer. There's always going to be a holistic approach to this problem.
And then you find out you can't. And it's hard to keep faith that you'll get there. One of the hardest things about being on a journey to figure out your health, whether it's something like I have or a completely different condition, is that you feel insane 75% of the time because you don't have answers. Like answers, even if they're terrible, knowing what's going on or even the hope of knowing what's going on is the only thing that kind of keeps you alive some days. There's still so much.
Yeah, I was so scared of what was wrong with me before I realized, like before I figured out that it was the thyroid issue, because I was so, it shows up in so many different ways. And it was so scary to not know, because A lot of people get hypochondria when they're hypothyroid because you have a lot of mysterious symptoms. And when your thyroid is not working properly, or again, the utilization of the hormone or medication is not working, you have a lot of symptoms. It affects almost every system of your body. So I totally understand what she's saying, and she's right. You know, luckily for me, it was pretty much two major issues. Just that's enough. I don't need to have like 500 issues. You know, I'm grateful that it was those two. But it was, you know, E followed by the letter D, which caused hypo. And it was making it very severe. So I stopped one, I stopped the behavior, and the thyroid healed. But again, it's been 4 years almost. It'll be 4 years in March. It's a lot of damage, a lot of restoring and work that needed to be done, and that will need to be done probably the rest of my life. So I think you have to just once you have the diagnosis, you have to take it seriously, and you have to do everything in your power to compensate for it, to mitigate it, to make it better. If it's not curable, then you work and act in a way to accommodate it the best to your ability. You take it seriously. You care about it. If it is curable, you cure it. You resolve it. You don't just ignore it and then blame those issues for why you can't lose weight. That's not acceptable. It isn't.
I don't have answers for, and sometimes it does feel like, am I gonna feel shitty for the rest of my life? Is my health gonna be unpredictable and uncontrollable
You need to lose weight, Anna.
and unexpected for the rest of my life? So when I stopped losing weight, it became really frustrating. So I ended up working on a campaign related to weight, and I met a doctor that I really loved who studied obesity conditions. And I decided to take a next step and try to figure out what was going on by going to see her. So I started driving to Houston once a month to see this doctor. And I did start taking Ozempic, but the weirdest thing happened through that process is, yes, I lost weight, but not as quickly as they would have imagined. But what did happen is I started to have just a complete reduction in pain and increased mobility. So I started becoming more and more active because the barriers to my activity had suddenly been reduced. So it didn't hurt as much to kneel, or all of my joints used to hurt really bad. So she began to see that that was a little weird. That was another kind of weird behavior. And this starts a kind of trend of things just being slightly off. So she submits a swab for genetic testing for what's called the Rare Obesity Panel. Now, this panel is not the same as the obesity gene panel that you see a lot of people are doing research on right now. These are for conditions that are classified as rare. So, like the weird ones. My doctor basically sat me down and she said, listen, I've never had a patient have one of these genes personally, but it is something that we just want to eliminate because your body is not showing normal behavior. So went in, had my rare obesity panel done, and lo and behold, I come back with two genes. So essentially what happened when I got my genetic results back is they give you a little counselor that sits down with you and walks you through your genetic tests and what they mean. One of the genes is a known gene. It has a lot of different things associated with it. And then additionally, they were like, oh, by the way, these are so rare, no one will ever research them. So good luck. Have a nice day. Goodbye. Like, that's literally what they told me. And my doctor there was like, I'm not a geneticist, so we can try things. We can figure out what we can do, but I can't guarantee that it's going to work because at this point, we don't really know. I haven't seen this before. I don't have any previous experience to go off of. She talked to some of her colleagues at a variety of different places. No one had seen the combination of the two genes. So there was just
How much do you want to bet that obesity will make whatever this is worse? It doesn't matter, Anna. You still need to lose weight. I'm going to say it.
really nothing to go on as part of what do we do. About 7 years prior to this, I got an email from a woman, and she wrote me an email and was like, I think you have this condition called lipedema. And I was like, it is so uncool to try to diagnose somebody on the internet. And I unfortunately talked mad shit about this woman behind her back. And I feel bad because at that point, I just was sick of people telling me what they thought about my health. And so I totally tuned it out. I didn't even believe it was a real condition. I think I need to say that. I need to say that I thought it was something made up. Like made up, like, hey, you're delusional.
You think that it's not worsened by overeating? It is. Newsflash, it is.
I'm just going to tell you that this is your diagnosis so you stop bothering me. Like a pseudo diagnosis.
These should be reasons to be even more on point, Anna. Not more careless.
When I started going through this medical process, that word came up again. And I was like...
Okay. We're going to stop it here because this is like a whole other thing. So we'll pick it up at about this point tomorrow. You guys still with me? You guys alive? Are you surviving? Let me know if you're surviving. But thank you guys so much for watching. I will talk to you guys tomorrow. I'll see you back. Peace.